Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and we're going to make a matching sword and dagger frog. Been too long waiting on this video. I need to get this one knocked out, but at the same time, let's have a good time with it. Now, if you're new to leathercraft or you're new to costuming, a frog simply connects our sword or dagger to our belt. And I can only assume it's called a frog because we have straps up for our belt, straps down for our weapon, thus it looks like a frog. Now, we're going to go over to our pattern very shortly. But there's a number of things we need to consider if we're going to wear a sword. A lot of pitfalls there, and we're going to go into every one of those. But let's do this first. Anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to our website. So I'm going to do a quick costume change. Let's talk about some things we need to think about before we make our frog. And over to the costume that says I've had more than enough of the armor for one day. Now I'm going to roll here. Let me apologize right now. I've made a lot of frogs and I've carried a lot of swords. This is simply my advice, just my opinion, but I think we've got some valid points here. Now, from the dawn of time, the most confusing thing about frogs is this. Right hand draw is a left hand carry. It's opposite of our primary hand. Then our dagger is going to go opposite of that. I've made that mistake so many times, I don't even want to go into it. Now, to carry our sword, basically we have two ways. We can go straight up and down, or we can go at an angle. Now, we'll deal with back hangers at a later point. But for right now, we're going to attach our sword and dagger to our belt. Now, I've got a beautiful hand and a half, and I love this sword. It's a gorgeous bastard sword. I've got some blade length here. So if I'm carrying this straight up and down, and I love it, very period look. Here's the biggest problem. I tend to rest my hand on my pommel. You know what? It is what it is. Very comfortable. Here's where this can go wrong. If I take a step with my left foot, my sword's going right between my legs, and I'm going to do a big old fat face plant right in the middle of a Ren Fair, and that never looks good. The second problem with straight up and down is this. We're going to add a belt loop. Then we may very well add a D-ring or O-ring so the sword moves easily. Well, the problem is our sword's getting lower and lower and lower. Now, for an archer's sword, short sword, or we're talking axes or war hammers, that's not really such a problem. But for a longer sword, it absolutely can be. Now let's jump over to carrying at an angle. My favorite, but let's do an extreme. And I see this with the rapier carriers all the time. We're going to give this a lot of angle. Here's the problem. We've now become a menace to everybody within 3 feet of us. We're going to stand in lines at cons and fairs. You know what? It is what it is. But the second bigger problem, let's don't go into a vendor's booth because we're going to rake some product. Absolutely. So what we're going to do, we're going to go at an angle, but let's bring this up to about right there. It's out of my way. I can rest my hand on it, but a big point here, a big plus, is now I can lay my horn right on my sword. That's convenient. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to do another costume change, get back into my shop clothes, and then let's take a look at a pattern. These patterns are going to look ridiculously confusing. They're not. We've got a digital pick. We'll look at that shortly. But because these look confusing, I'm going to do this scene a little bit differently. We've got the finished piece, or at least the assembled piece. Then we've got the pieces and parts. Every hole is going to fall right into place. Let's start right here. Let's start with our sword. Now, we could go simple. We could do just a simple square or rectangle, small cinch, a couple of belt loops. We've got a frog. But let's add a little style to this. In fact, here's one point. Right here, notice we've got a good curve right there. That's because my sword's going to sit right here. My handle will start about right here. So when I go to grab my sword, I grab nothing but handle. Now, our angle. You'll notice I'm not far off of about 90 degrees. Your frog, your call. But somewhere in there, to me, is a good angle. Now, on our holes, let's jump over to this. We got holes everywhere. Make perfect sense. So right off the bat, right at the top, we've got 2 holes here. These will be our rivet holes. We're going to drop in our belt loops up there. Our next hole out here, we're going to drop in a concho for decoration. We're going to do that on both pieces. It's going to really tie these together. Over here, we've got 4 holes. Those are for our cinch. Our cinch is going to rivet on right there. And the last holes, these are going to look confusing, but they're not. If you've ever been to a Ren Fair or say a con, you've got to have your weapon piece tied, P-E-A-C-E. You need to have your weapon tied down. That keeps you from drawing it too fast, or for the bigger problem, somebody else drawing your sword. Now, with that, I tend to use a nice bright suede. So therefore, when I walk through the front gates, anybody there can see that I'm in full compliance. And we've got our piece tie on both frogs. Now, for our Dagger frog, simply the same thing in reverse. So here's our frog pattern here. We've got our belt, or our belt loop rivet holes, concho, cinch, and then our piece tie. So easy enough there. Now, let's jump over to a digital pic. Therefore, we can get all of the specifics. So sword frog left, right, dagger. You'll notice they're basically the same holes. It's just the body is reversed. Now, jumping over to the balance of the pieces here. We've got our cinch and our belt loops. So, on our sword and our dagger frog, let's jump over to a digital pic there. Basically, simple measurements. We've got our 4 holes in the center, and we've got lace holes on the outside. On our sword, we've got 5 lace holes, half-inch spread. Dagger cinch, same thing, but 4 holes, half-inch spread. Last, our belt loop, 7 inches by 5/8 of an inch. Now, to measure for our cinch, what I want to do is measure the circumference of my throat. Now, with that, I want to shorten that just a little bit. I want to come in about a 1/2 inch below that. And here's why. We're going to cinch this up. Most swords, or most scabbards, have some kind of a post or hook. What I want is for that post to sit right inside my lace. Here's why. Say if our post is above our lace, what can happen is when we draw our sword, the scabbard comes with it. Or the bigger problem, and this has happened to me, if our post is below, our scabbard can slip right off of our sword or dagger. We'll never know it. We're in a lot of costume. Something falls off, we may never feel that. Luckily, somebody behind me picked it up and handed it to me. So first off, I've lost a good scabbard. Bigger problem, now I have an exposed open blade at a fair. They're never happy about that. So on our measurements, on our patterns, really nothing here is complicated. So I've got 2 belt loops cut. Let's jump over to our main table. I'm going to cut 2 more loops, then we are moving forward. We've got all of our pieces and parts cut except for 2 of our belt loops, so I'm going to strap those out. We're going to come out of our natural veg single shoulders. I love these. Very affordable, quality leather, and I use them in most of my videos. So on our belt loops, what we've got is 5/8 inch. So I'm going to set my wooden strapper at 5/8 of an inch, and we need 7 inch in length. And let's cut to size. Now let's mark from pattern and punch. On our revolving punch, I want to use about my second tube up because I want that hole to be a little bit snug on my rivet. That's going to be a good bite. We're going to be carrying a little weight with our frog, so I want that to connect well. Now we're going to jump over to our groover. I've got this set at about 1/8 of an inch. That to me is a nice distance from our edge. And what I'm going to do is groove all sides, all pieces. And we've got a groove line in. Now that's going to add a nice touch, a very finished look to our frogs. Now as a side note, I rarely ever see a quality frog out there production-wise. Usually they're poorly designed, they're poorly made, and a lot of times they're not even leather. Here, not an issue. Okay, let's jump over. We're using an 8 to 9 ounce. So let's jump over to a number 2 bevel, and I'm going to bevel all sides, front and back. Sounds like somebody's edger needs a little bit of sharpening. So now I've got all edges, front and back done. Let's slick all edges. Now we don't necessarily have to do this, but it's a really nice touch. And in all honesty, every time we look at our frog, we're going to be happy with the fact that we went to the extra trouble. So let's take our slicker, and I'm going to jump up to about this largest groove. Now again, the point here is not pressure. It's more heat and friction. So therefore, we're going to get a nice rounded edge on that. And our last piece. Now I can never tell if the camera can pick this up, but we've now got a nice glossed, slicked edge. That's a nice detail. Now let's let these dry for a little bit. Let our straps dry out, then we're going to jump over to our punch table, drop in our end punches. All we really have to do here is punch our round ends on our straps. These are 5/8 inch, so I'm going to go with a 5/8 inch round end. Now, this is a little bit of an obscure size. We could go with a 3/4, we could even go with a 1. Or if we don't have our end punches, we can just clip 2 corners and we'll be fine. But since we've got the tool, let's use it. And I'm going to punch both ends. Very nice touch. Good professional look. So I'm going to set us up over on the main table to dye because we were close to being done. We're going to go with the Pro Dye in black. Well, first off, the Pro Dye. It's the only dye I use. I love it. Secondly, black. Now, timeless classic. We're going to have no issues here, but we're going black mainly because the majority of sheaths and scabbards out there are in black. Same with the sword handles. But at the same time, brown, is that not beautiful? Now, if you want to make a brown scabbard, look for our video on making a traditional scabbard. Super easy to do. Now, I typically dip dye, which means I'm going to put a hook in here and just run that quickly through my dye. But there's so little to dye here, let's just jump over to our daubers. So I'm going to add dye front, back, and both edges, or all edges, on all pieces. And this looks good. Love the black. Now, with the dye, we need good ventilation in our shop. But also, too, right here, as I run across my lace holes, let's give that a little extra boost of dye. Let that dye sink down in there. Now, if it's a little naked on the rivet holes inside, doesn't matter. But I want those good and black along our lace holes. All right, let's give this about maybe hour and a half, 2 hours. Then we're going to add a top coat. We're getting close. Ample dry time and a little cleanup. Let's jump over to our leather balm. One of my absolute favorites, and I use this in most every video. It's a low gloss. I like that. But secondly, easy to apply. We don't really need ventilation. Actually smells good, but it's really going to enrich in this black. So let's take 2 rags. I've got a wet and a dry. So with my wet, I'll apply. With my dry, I'm going to buff. Let's start right here with our sword frog body. And we've got some good coverage, so let's jump over to our dry rag and let's buff. And a little buffing. Look at that, that looks good. Nice, rich black. Now let's do this. Let's hit our edges one more time. And basically we're just going to slick again, but that's going to give that a nice look. There we go. Okay, edges look good. Top coat, very nice. So I'm going to do the same thing to the remaining pieces. Those look good. Let's step over to our marble, start putting these together. If your scabbard or your sheath doesn't come with a post or a hook on the throat, we can always add some suede. That would be a nice touch. It'll give a little bit of grip to our sword, but at the same time, very professional detail. So let's start right here with our dagger frog. So over here we've got our four holes to connect our cinch. Now I'm going to use the antique nickel double cap. This is the medium, or the 5/16. Good. Let's drop our frog on. Perfect. Pattern's working nicely. And double caps, love these. The cap will actually snap down onto the post without setting it. So therefore we can put a cap on all our rivets. They're not going to fall out and roll around on our table. Okay, there's our cinch. Now let's jump over to our belt loops. We're going to jump up to the large, or the 7/16 inch double cap. Let's come through the back, then through our body. Bend that over and set our caps. Good looking frog. Okay, let's jump over to our sword. Now on this, I've got some Chicago screws out here because we can carry a little bit of weight on our sword. So if you've got a much larger sword, you can always go with Chicago screws to connect that down. But in this situation, we're just going to go again with our medium double caps. And our sword ready to go. Let's jump back over to our main table, add a concho and some lace. Let's start with our concho first, and I love these conchos, the antique nickel. It's got a good period look to them. So I've got a 1.5 inch and 1.25 inch. So on our sword, we're going to go with the larger, but I tend to like to add just a little bit of white glue so that screw doesn't work out over time. Well, that looks good, nice touch. That's going to look good with our sword. Okay, same with our dagger. Nice set of matching frogs, very cool. Now on our lace, let's do this. We're going to lace away from our handle. We don't want end pieces hanging up to where we can grab those when we grab our sword. So on our sword frog, let's lace this loosely. Now you can lace this any way you want to. In fact, we can get very creative with that. But I've just got a back and forth there, so let's slide our scabbard in, and I'm going to lift that up, so therefore it's going to sit about right there, right between our inside X and our outside X. Now let's crank this down. Good and secure. Now we can lace this any way we want to. We can get creative here, but for the most part, that is absolutely secure in that frog. Now let's just drop in a square knot. Secure, ready to go. Even be a nice touch to put a couple of beads on the end of that. I love dangling lace. Let's do the same thing for our dagger frog. And again, looks great, very secure. Last step, let's take our red suede. Now we don't have to go with red, I just like that because of the color. We can go with any color. Let's tie a knot right in the middle. And now let's feed this from the back. That knot is simply there to keep these from falling out or working out. And our piece tie is in. Well, that is one good looking set of matching frogs. Let's get a little better look with the sword and the dagger in the sheath. The conchos really tie it together, and notice they look good both with the blackened metal and the polished. But for left-handed folks, all we have to do is flop the bodies. Everything else fits. And another costume change. This is starting to get time consuming. But for us costumers, any excuse to throw on the costume. We accomplished exactly what we set out to do. We have got a matching set of frogs. Now, they're well made. They look good. They're durable. They're well designed. Those are going to last for years. And the plus there, I can rest my hand right on my pommel. Same on my dagger. Now, with our dagger, here's a plus. We can always carry our horn on our dagger. Makes it very convenient, but always accessible. But let's keep an eye out for this, because an upside down horn, just like our flag, sign of distress. I hope every set of frogs you make is spot on beautiful. Good luck with your projects.